Charlotte Brooks pressed her frozen hand over her little sister's mouth to stop the screaming. The wind howled through the cracks in the abandoned cabin walls, and somewhere in the darkness, 5-year-old Jacob had stopped shivering. That terrified her more than anything. Children who stopped shivering in this cold didn't wake up. She was 12 years old, and she was watching her siblings die. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, stay with Charlotte and her brothers and sisters until the very end. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far their story reaches. The wagon had been gone for 3 hours now. Charlotte knew because she'd been counting. Counting was all she could do to keep from screaming, to keep from running out into that white hell and chasing after the woman who'd promised to take care of them. "Charlie!" Sam's voice came from somewhere behind her. "Charlie, I can't feel my feet anymore. Stomp them!" Charlotte didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on the window on the wall of white that had swallowed their stepmother's wagon whole. "Keep stomping until you feel something." "I've been stomping for an hour." "Then stomp harder." She heard him moving, heard the dull thud of his boots against the rotted floorboards. The cabin they'd found, if you could call 4 walls and half a roof, a cabin, sat at the edge of nowhere. Their stepmother had known exactly what she was doing when she'd stopped the wagon here. "I need to go outside," Harriet had said, her voice flat as river ice. "Wait here. Don't move." Charlotte had known. Even then, standing in the back of that wagon with her 4 siblings pressed against her like frightened rabbits, she'd known. She'd seen it in Harriet's eyes, that terrible emptiness, that relief. But what could she do? She was 12. Harriet was a grown woman with the law on her side. Their father was dead, buried under a mountain of rock in a mine shaft that had swallowed him whole 3 months ago. Their mother had died giving birth to the twins 5 years before that. They had no one. "Charlie?" Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Charlie, Lily won't talk to me. She won't even look at me." Charlotte finally turned from the window. The cabin was dark, lit only by the pale gray light filtering through gaps in the walls. Emma stood before her, 8 years old, and shaking her brown hair tangled with ice crystals. Behind her, the twins huddled in the corner. Jacob sat with his knees drawn to his chest, rocking slowly. Lily pressed against him, clutching that ragged doll their mother had made, the only thing she hadn't let go of since the day Mama died. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't seeing anything. She hadn't spoken a single word since Harriet had pushed them out of the wagon. "Lily." Charlotte crossed the cabin and knelt before her little sister. "Lily, honey, look at me." Nothing. Those blue eyes, so much like their mother's, stared straight through her. "She's scared," Jacob whispered. His voice was hoarse. "She told me she's scared, but she won't say it out loud." "How did she tell you if she won't talk?" "She just did." Jacob's lower lip trembled. "Charlie, I'm cold. I'm really, really cold." Charlotte pulled both twins against her, feeling how small they were, how fragile. 5 years old. They should be playing with wooden horses and learning their letters. Instead, they were freezing to death in an abandoned cabin because a woman who'd promised to love them had decided they weren't worth the trouble. "Sam." Charlotte's voice came out harder than she intended. "Get over here. We need to share body heat." "I'm trying to find something to burn." Sam's voice drifted from the darker corner of the cabin. "There's got to be something. Old furniture boards, anything." "Forget it. Get over here now." "But..." Now Samuel. He came. He always came when she used that voice, Mama's voice, the one that meant business. Sam was 10, old enough to want to be the man of the family, young enough to still need his big sister. He dropped down beside them, and Charlotte pulled him into the huddle. 5 children. 1, 12, 1, 10, 1, 8, 2, 5. Pressed together in the corner of a dying cabin while a blizzard raged outside, and their stepmother rode toward whatever future she'd planned for herself. A future that didn't include them. "Tell me a story," Emma whispered. "Please, Charlie, tell me the one about Mama." "Not now. Please, I'm scared. I don't want to be scared anymore." Charlotte closed her eyes. She could feel them all trembling, could feel the cold seeping through their thin clothes like water through a cracked dam. They didn't have coats thick enough for this. Harriet had made sure of that, selling off their warmest things before they'd left. "Mama had hair like yours," Charlotte began, her voice mechanical. Long and brown, and she could braid it so fast her hands were just a blur. What else? She sang when she cooked, old songs, the ones her mama taught her, and she never raised her voice, not even when we tracked mud through the house. "I miss her," Emma's voice cracked. "I miss her so much, Charlie." "I know. I miss her too." "Why did she have to die? Why did Papa have to die? Why does everyone leave us?" Charlotte didn't have an answer. She'd been asking herself the same questions for 5 years, and God hadn't seen fit to respond. "Because the world ain't fair," Sam said quietly. "That's what Pa used to say. The world ain't fair, but we make do." "I don't want to make do. I want to go home." "We don't have a home anymore." Charlotte's voice was flat. "Harriet sold it. Sold everything. The house, the furniture, Mama's china. She sold it all and took the money." "Where did she go?" "I don't know. And I don't care." But that was a lie. Charlotte cared. She cared so much it burned in her chest like a hot coal. She wanted to find Harriet Simmons and make her answer for what she'd done. She wanted to scream and rage and demand to know how a person could abandon 5 children in a blizzard like they were nothing more than unwanted dogs. But rage wouldn't keep them warm. Rage wouldn't fill their empty bellies or put a roof over their heads. So Charlotte swallowed it down, buried it deep, and focused on what mattered: survival. "Listen to me." She pulled back just enough to look at each of them. "We're going to make it through this night. All of us. Together. Do you understand?" Sam nodded, his jaw set. Emma bit her lip, but nodded too. Jacob was crying silently, tears freezing on his cheeks before they could fall. Lily just stared, her fingers white-knuckled around that ragged doll. "We're going to take turns keeping watch, 2 hours each. If anyone starts to fall asleep, we wake them up. Sleeping in cold like this." Charlotte's voice caught. "Sleeping is dangerous. We have to stay awake." "For how long?" Sam asked. "Until morning. Until the storm passes. Then we find help." "What if there's no help to find?" Charlotte didn't answer. She couldn't. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Charlotte kept them moving, kept them talking, kept them awake. She made them stomp their feet and rub their hands together. She told stories until her voice went hoarse, then made Sam and Emma take over. When Jacob's eyes started to close, she shook him until he cried. "I'm sorry," she whispered, holding him close. "I'm sorry, but you have to stay awake. Please, Jacob. Please stay awake for me." "I'm tired, Charlie. I'm so tired." I know you are. But you have to fight it. Can you do that? Can you fight for me?" He nodded weakly, but his eyes were glazing over. The cold was winning. Charlotte felt panic rising in her chest. She'd kept them alive this long, but she was running out of time. Running out of options. The storm showed no sign of letting up, and dawn was still hours away. "Sam?" Her voice was urgent. "Help me get him up. We need to walk." "Walk where?" "Anywhere. Just around the cabin. Movement creates heat." They walked. Round and round the small space, stumbling over rotted boards and each other's feet. Charlotte carried Lily on her hip. The girl had gone completely limp, like a doll herself. Emma held Jacob's hand, practically dragging him forward. Sam brought up the rear, watching for anyone who started to fall. "1 foot," Charlotte chanted. "Then the other. 1 foot, then the other. Keep moving. Don't stop." "Charlie, I can't." "You can. You have to. 1 foot, then the other." It was somewhere past midnight when Jacob collapsed. One moment he was walking, the next he was on the ground, his small body crumpled like discarded paper. Charlotte dropped to her knees beside him, her heart slamming against her ribs. Jacob, wake up." She shook him gently at first, then harder. "Jacob." His eyes fluttered open, but they were unfocused, distant. "Mama." "No, honey, it's Charlie. It's your sister. You need to get up." "I saw Mama. She was right there. She said it's okay to sleep now." Terror clawed at Charlotte's throat. "No, no, Jacob, you can't sleep. Mama wouldn't want you to sleep. She'd want you to fight. She'd want you to stay with us." "But I'm so tired." "I know. I know you are." Charlotte was crying now, hot tears that froze against her skin. "But you have to stay awake. Please, I can't lose you. I can't lose any of you. You're all I have left." Sam knelt beside her, his face pale in the darkness. "What do we do, Charlie? What do we do?" Charlotte didn't know. For the first time in her life, she truly didn't know. She'd been taking care of her siblings since she was 7 years old, since Mama died, and Papa started drinking, and someone had to make sure the little ones were fed and clean and safe. She'd always found a way. But there was no way out of this. They were going to die here, all 5 of them, in this rotting cabin at the edge of nowhere. And no one would ever know. No one would ever care. "God." The word tore from her throat, raw and desperate. "Please, if you're listening, please, I don't care about me. I don't care what happens to me. But they're innocent. They're just children. Please don't let them die. Please send someone. Anyone. Please." The wind howled. The snow fell. And Charlotte held her brother's dying body and waited for a miracle she didn't believe would come. The horse nearly threw him twice before Eli gave up fighting and let the animal find its own way through the white hell. He shouldn't be out here. He knew that. Any man with sense was holed up somewhere warm, waiting for the blizzard to pass. But 20 head of cattle had spooked during the first gust and scattered into the storm, and Eli Thornton wasn't the kind of man who let his animals die if he could help it. Stupid. That's what Maggie would have called him. Stupid and stubborn and too proud to admit when he was beat. She'd said it with love, though back when she was alive to say anything at all. 3 years. 3 years since the typhoid had taken her and their daughter both, and Eli still reached for her in the night. Still expected to hear Hope's laughter echoing through the empty house. Still woke up some mornings forgetting they were gone and had to learn it all over again. The horse stumbled, and Eli grabbed the saddle horn to keep from pitching forward. His face was numb beneath the wool scarf, his hands clumsy inside gloves that weren't thick enough for this kind of cold. He should turn back. The cattle were probably dead by now anyway, frozen stiff wherever the storm had caught them. But something kept him moving forward. Some instinct he couldn't name pulling him through the white like a fish on a line. That's when he saw it. A light, faint as a dying ember flickering through the curtain of snow. Eli blinked, sure he was imagining it. But no. There it was again. A small orange glow coming from the direction of the old Morrison cabin, the one that had been abandoned since '82 when the family had packed up and headed to California. Someone was in there. He turned his horse toward the light, fighting through drifts that came up to the animal's chest. The wind screamed in his ears, tried to push him back, but Eli pushed harder. He'd survived blizzards before. He'd survive this one too. The cabin materialized out of the white like a ghost. Half the roof was gone, and snow had piled against the walls like ocean waves frozen mid-crash. The light came from a gap in the door firelight, weak and guttering. Eli dismounted and tied his horse to what was left of the porch railing. His legs nearly buckled beneath him. He'd been riding for hours, and the cold had sapped everything he had. But he forced himself forward, forced himself to push open that broken door and step inside. What he saw stopped him cold. Children. 5 of them huddled in the corner like a litter of abandoned puppies. The oldest, a girl maybe 12, had positioned herself between him and the others, and she was holding a kitchen knife in a grip that suggested she knew how to use it. "Stay back." Her voice was raw shaking, but her hand was steady. "I'll cut you if you come any closer." Eli raised his hand slowly. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt nobody." That's what they all say. "Who's they?" The girl didn't answer. Her eyes, green as spring grass, darted to the children behind her. Eli followed her gaze and felt something crack open in his chest. A boy, maybe 10, pressing a younger girl against him like he was trying to shield her from the world. Another boy, much smaller, lying limp on the ground with his head in the older girl's lap. And a fifth child, another little girl sitting motionless in the shadows, clutching a rag doll and staring at nothing. Jesus Christ! The words slipped out before Eli could stop them. How long you been out here? Long enough. Where's your folks? The girl's jaw tightened. Gone. Gone where? Just gone. Eli took in the scene with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen hard things. The children's clothes were thin, threadbare. Their lips were blue, their faces pale as the snow outside. The little boy on the ground wasn't moving, and the girl holding him had been crying. Eli could see the frozen tracks of tears on her cheeks. That boy needs help, he said quietly. I know that. The girl's voice cracked. Don't you think I know that? Then let me help him. Why? Why would you help us? You don't even know us. It was a fair question. A smart question. This girl had learned young that the world wasn't kind to vulnerable people, and she wasn't about to trust a stranger just because he'd walked through a door. Eli thought about Maggie, about hope, about the empty house waiting for him back at the ranch, the silence that pressed down on him every night like a physical weight. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Because you're children and you're dying, and I ain't the kind of man who rides past that. The girl studied him, really looked at him, her eyes searching his face for the lie, for the trap, for the hidden cruelty that experience had taught her to expect. She must not have found it because after a long moment, she lowered the knife. His name is Jacob, she said, and her voice broke on the word. He's 5 years old, and he stopped shivering an hour ago, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to save him. Eli crossed the cabin in 3 strides and knelt beside the unconscious boy. Jacob's skin was waxy, his breathing shallow. Hypothermia and bad. But he was still alive. That was something. He needs warmth, Eli said, already shrugging off his heavy coat. Real warmth, not this. He wrapped the coat around the small body, then looked at the girl. What's your name? Charlotte. Charlie. Charlie, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My ranch is about 4 miles south of here. I've got a warm house food medicine. But I can't carry all of you at once, and I can't leave anyone behind. What are you saying? I'm saying we've got to move fast. All of us. Together. Eli stood lifting Jacob's limp form in his arms. Can the others walk? Charlie looked at her siblings. The 10-year-old boy nodded grimly. The 8-year-old girl was crying but standing. The little girl with the doll hadn't moved at all. Sam and Emma can walk, Charlie said. Lily. She hesitated. Lily doesn't walk anymore. Not since today. Eli didn't ask what had happened today. He could guess. Can you carry her? Yes. Then do it. We're leaving now. In the storm. The storm's the only reason you're not already dead, girl. It's what kept whoever left you from coming back to finish the job. Now move. Charlie flinched at his words, but she didn't argue. She crossed to her little sister and gathered her up, the small body limp against her chest. The rag doll dangled from Lily's fingers, its button eyes staring at nothing. Sam? Charlie's voice was steady now, commanding. Take Emma's hand. Don't let go for anything. I won't. They filed out of the cabin into the howling white. Eli led the way, Jacob pressed against his chest, using his body to break the wind for the others. Behind him, he could hear Charlie murmuring encouragement to her siblings. Could hear the smaller children crying as the cold hit them full force. 4 miles. In good weather, on a clear trail, it was nothing. In a blizzard with 5 half-frozen children, it might as well have been 100. But Eli had made a choice when he'd walked through that door. He'd chosen to help. And Eli Thornton didn't make choices lightly. "Stay close," he called over his shoulder. "Step where I step. And whatever happens, don't stop moving." They pushed into the storm. And Charlotte had never known cold like this. It wasn't the sharp, clean cold of a winter morning. It was a living thing, a predator with teeth and claws trying to drag her down into the white and hold her there forever. Every step was a battle. Every breath was a knife in her lungs. But she kept moving. Lily was a dead weight in her arms, her small body giving off no warmth at all. Charlotte couldn't tell if her little sister was conscious or not. Lily's eyes were closed, her face pressed against Charlotte's shoulder, that ragged doll trapped between them. "Please," Charlotte whispered so quiet even she could barely hear it. "Please hold on, just a little longer." Behind her she could hear Sam and Emma struggling. Emma was crying. She'd been crying for hours it seemed, but her feet kept moving. Sam had one arm around his younger sister and the other stretched out for balance, his face set in a grimace of pure determination. They were Brooke's children. They didn't give up. The man ahead of them, Eli, he'd said his name, was moved through the storm like he'd been born to it. His broad shoulders cut a path through the wind, and he held Jacob with a gentleness that made Charlotte's chest ache. She didn't trust him. She couldn't trust him, not after everything. But he was their only chance, and she'd learned long ago that beggars couldn't be choosers. "There," Eli's voice carried back through the wind. "You see that light?" Charlotte squinted through the white. At first, she saw nothing. Then slowly, a shape emerged from the chaos. A house. 2 stories solid wood, with warm light glowing in the windows like a promise. "Thank God," Sam breathed. They stumbled toward it, and Charlotte felt something loosen in her chest. They'd made it. Against all odds, against everything the world had thrown at them. They'd made it. The door opened before they reached the porch, and a woman appeared in the frame. She was older, maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and a round face that reminded Charlotte of a grandmother from a storybook. "Lord have mercy!" The woman rushed forward, her eyes going wide at the sight of them. "Eli Thornton, what in heaven's name?" "No time, Agnes. Get blankets, hot water, whatever medicine we've got." "Who are these children?" "Later. Right now they're dying." Agnes didn't ask any more questions. She disappeared into the house, and Eli ushered them through the door into warmth so sudden and overwhelming that Charlotte nearly collapsed. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Agnes stripped off their frozen clothes and wrapped them in quilts. She made them drink something hot and sweet that burned going down, but spread warmth through Charlotte's frozen limbs. She worked over Jacob with hands that were surprisingly gentle for their roughness, rubbing his skin, checking his pulse, murmuring prayers under her breath. Through it all, Eli was there. He carried the younger children to beds, built up the fire, until it roared, brought more blankets when Agnes asked for them. He didn't hover, didn't get in the way, but he was always exactly where he needed to be. Charlotte watched him, and she didn't know what to feel. She'd spent the last 3 months hating adults, hating Harriet for marrying their father, hating their father for dying, hating God for taking their mother and then taking everything else. Adults were liars. Adults made promises they didn't keep. Adults left you when you needed them most. But this man had walked into a blizzard to save cattle, and he'd walked out carrying her brother. "He's going to be all right." Agnes's voice broke through Charlotte's thoughts. She was standing in the doorway of the room where Jacob lay, her face tired but hopeful. "The little one, Jacob, he's going to be all right. Got him warm in time. He'll need rest, and he might have some frostbite on his toes, but he'll live." Charlotte felt her knees go weak. She reached for the wall, bracing herself, and suddenly she was crying, really crying for the first time since Harriet had left them. Great racking sobs that tore through her body like storms. "Shh, child." Agnes was beside her in an instant, pulling her into an embrace that smelled like bread and wood smoke. "It's all right now. You're safe. You're all safe." I thought he was going to die. I thought they were all going to die, and it was going to be my fault." Nothing that happened was your fault. I should have stopped her. I should have done something. Stopped who? Eli's voice came from somewhere behind them. What happened to you, Charlotte? Charlotte pulled back from Agnes's embrace, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She looked at Eli, at this stranger who'd saved them for reasons she still didn't understand, and she made a decision. If he was going to help them, he deserved to know what he was helping with. Our stepmother. Charlotte said, her voice flat. Her name is Harriet Simmons. She married our father 2 years ago after our mother died. When Pa died in the mines 3 months ago, Charlotte's voice caught. She sold everything. The house, the furniture, all of it. Then she loaded us in a wagon and said we were going to find her brother in Montana. But she never planned to take you there. No. Charlotte's hands curled into fists. She stopped at that cabin and told us to wait inside. Said she'd be right back. Then she drove away and never looked back. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with horror and rage. Agnes had gone pale. Eli's face had turned to stone, his jaw clenched so tight Charlotte could see the muscles working beneath his skin. She left you. His voice was barely controlled. In the middle of a blizzard, 5 children, she just left you. We weren't her blood. She said she couldn't afford to feed mouths that weren't her own. That's not... Eli stopped himself, took a breath. That's not something a person does. That's not something a human being does. She did it. Charlotte's voice was hollow. And no one will ever punish her for it. No one will ever know. We're nobodies. Orphans. Who's going to care what happens to us? Eli was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, but with an edge of steel beneath. I care. Charlotte looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. He was tall, broad-shouldered with lines around his eyes that suggested he'd spent most of his life squinting into sun and wind. His hands were rough, his clothes practical, his face weathered by years of hard work. He looked like exactly what he was, a rancher, a man of the land, someone who'd built his life with sweat and determination. But there was something else in his eyes. Something Charlotte recognized because she saw it in the mirror every morning. Loss. Grief. The hollow ache of loving someone who wasn't there anymore. Why? Charlotte asked. Why do you care? You don't know us. Because I was where you are once. Eli's voice was quiet. Not abandoned, but alone. Lost. Wondering if anyone in the world gave a damn whether I lived or died. He paused. Someone helped me then. A stranger who didn't have to. I reckon it's time I returned the favor. Charlotte didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long expecting the worst from people that kindness felt like a trap, like a trick she hadn't figured out yet. But looking at Eli Thornton, she couldn't find the trick, couldn't find the catch. All she saw was a man who'd walked through a blizzard to save children he'd never met, and who was standing here now, offering them something Charlotte had given up hoping for. A chance. What happens now? She asked. Now. Eli glanced at Agnes, then back at Charlotte. Now you rest. You eat. You get warm. And tomorrow when the storm passes, we figure out the rest. You can't keep us. You're a single man. People will talk. Let them talk. I've never cared much for gossip. But, Charlotte. Eli's voice was gentle but firm. You've been carrying your siblings for God knows how long. You've kept them alive through things that would break most adults. But you're 12 years old. It's time someone carried you for a while. Charlotte felt her defenses crumble. All the walls she'd built, all the armor she'd wrapped around herself, none of it was strong enough to withstand simple kindness. I don't know how to let someone help me, she whispered. Then you'll learn. We'll figure it out together. Charlotte nodded, and for the first time in 3 months, for the first time since her father had died and her world had shattered, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things might be okay. In the other room, Jacob slept, his breathing steady, Emma had curled up beside him, her small hand wrapped around his. Sam sat in a chair by the fire, fighting sleep but refusing to leave his siblings. And Lily. Silent, broken. Lily lay on a cot by the window, her fingers still clutched around that ragged doll, her eyes finally closed. Outside the storm raged, but inside Eli Thornton's ranch house, 5 children who'd been thrown away like garbage were warm for the first time in days, safe for the first time in months. And somewhere in Charlotte's chest, beneath all the fear and anger and grief, a tiny flame of hope flickered to life. Charlotte woke to the smell of bacon frying and the sound of voices she didn't recognize. For one terrible moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed beneath her was soft, too soft, and the room was warm in a way she'd forgotten rooms could be. Then the memories came flooding back. The blizzard, the cabin, Eli Thornton carrying Jacob through the snow. She sat up so fast her head spun. "Easy there." Agnes appeared in the doorway, a steaming cup in her hands. "You've been asleep for 14 hours. Your body needed it." "The others? Where are the others?" "Safe. Fed. Warmer than they've been in weeks from the look of it." Agnes crossed the room and pressed the cup into Charlotte's hands. "Drink this. It's broth. You need to eat something before you fall over." Charlotte wanted to argue, wanted to run to her siblings and see for herself that they were all right. But her hands were already wrapping around the cup, her body responding to the warmth and the smell before her mind could object. "Jacob," she asked between sips. "Awake and asking for you. He's got some frostbite on his toes, might lose the smallest one on his left foot, but he'll live." Agnes's voice was matter-of-fact, but not unkind. "That boy's tougher than he looks. He's 5 years old. He shouldn't have to be tough." "No, he shouldn't." Agnes sat on the edge of the bed, her weight causing the mattress to dip. "None of you should. But life don't much care what we should or shouldn't have to do." Charlotte finished the broth and set the cup aside. "Where's Eli?" "Out checking on the cattle. Storm passed about 3 hours ago, and he's been worried sick about those animals." Agnes paused. "He's been worried sick about you children too, though he'd rather swallow his own tongue than admit it." "Why does he care? He doesn't know us." Agnes was quiet for a moment, studying Charlotte's face with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by brave fronts. "That man lost his wife and daughter 3 years ago. Typhoid took them both in the same week. He's been rattling around this house ever since, working himself half to death because he can't stand the silence." She stood smoothing her apron. "Then he walks through a door and finds 5 children who need him. I reckon God works in mysterious ways." "I don't believe in God anymore." "That's all right. He believes in you." Agnes moved toward the door. "Get dressed. Your brothers and sisters have been asking for you since they woke up." Charlotte found them in the kitchen, clustered around a table that was too big for 5 small children. Emma was eating pancakes with the desperate focus of someone who'd forgotten what regular meals felt like. Sam sat beside her, his plate already clean, watching the door like he'd been waiting for Charlotte to appear. Jacob was wrapped in a quilt in the chair closest to the stove, pale but alert, his bandaged feet propped on a small stool. And Lily. Lily sat apart from the others, her back pressed against the wall, that ragged doll clutched to her chest. She wasn't eating. She wasn't looking at anyone. She was just there, like a ghost who hadn't realized she was supposed to move on. "Charlie." Emma launched herself out of her chair and across the room, crashing into Charlotte with enough force to make her stumble. "You're awake. Agnes said you needed to sleep, but I wanted to wake you up. But Sam said I couldn't, but you're awake now, so it doesn't matter." "Breathe, Emma." Charlotte wrapped her arms around her sister, holding tight. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise." "Promise." Sam had stood too, but he hung back, his hands shoved in his pockets. At 10 years old, he was caught in that awkward space between childhood and something harder, wanting comfort, but not wanting to admit it. "You okay?" Charlotte asked him. "Fine." His voice was gruff. "Jacob's the one who almost died." I did not almost die. Jacob's protest was indignant but weak. I was just really cold. You stopped shivering. That means you almost died. Does not. Does too. Boys. Charlotte's voice cut through their argument, and both of them went quiet. Some things hadn't changed. We're all alive. That's what matters. She crossed to Jacob and knelt beside his chair, checking his bandages, his color, the clarity in his eyes. He looked better than he had any right to look, considering. When she reached for his hand, he grabbed hers and held on tight. I was scared, Charlie, he whispered low enough that the others couldn't hear. I thought I was gonna die. I thought I saw Mama. I know. Charlotte's throat tightened. But you didn't die. You fought just like I asked you to. The man saved me, the big man with the sad eyes. His name is Eli. Is he going to be our new papa? The question hit Charlotte like a punch to the chest. I don't know, Jacob. I don't think so. He's just helping us. For how long? Charlotte didn't have an answer. She turned to look at Lily, still pressed against the wall, still silent. Charlotte approached slowly, like she was trying not to spook a wounded animal. Lily, honey, can you look at me? Nothing. Those blue eyes stayed fixed on some middle distance, seeing something that wasn't there. She hasn't talked since yesterday, Emma said quietly. I tried singing to her the song Mama used to sing, but she didn't even blink. She's in there. Jacob's voice was certain. She told me she's scared. She told me she doesn't know if it's safe yet. How does she tell you things if she doesn't talk? Sam demanded. She just does. We're twins. We know things. Charlotte reached out and touched Lily's hair, smoothing it back from her face. The little girl didn't flinch, didn't react at all. It was like touching a statue. It's okay, Charlotte murmured. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything. Just stay with us. That's all I need. Lily's fingers tightened around the doll. It was the only sign that she'd heard. The kitchen door opened, letting in a blast of cold air and the smell of horses and hay. Eli stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots, and stopped short when he saw Charlotte. You're up. His voice was gruff, carefully neutral. How do you feel? Better. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. For everything. Don't thank me yet. We still got a lot to figure out. He hung his coat on a peg by the door and moved to the stove, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Agnes tell you about Jacob's toes. She said he might lose one. Might. Doc Brennan's coming out this afternoon to take a look. He's the closest thing to a real doctor we've got in Clearwater. We don't have money for a doctor. Good thing I do then. Eli took a long drink of his coffee, not looking at her. You kids need clothes too. What you've got isn't fit for a Wyoming winter. We can't pay you back. Did I ask you to? Charlotte's jaw tightened. She hated this, hated feeling helpless and indebted. She'd spent too long being the one who took care of things to know how to let someone else take over. What do you want from us? The question came out sharper than she intended. Nobody does something for nothing. What's your angle? Eli set down his cup and turned to face her. His expression wasn't angry, wasn't offended. If anything, he looked sad. I want you to have breakfast, he said quietly. I want you to get warm and rest and let a doctor look at your brother's feet. That's all I want right now. Tomorrow, we can figure out the rest. And after tomorrow comes the day after that. We take it one step at a time. Charlotte wanted to argue, wanted to push and probe and find the hidden trap. But she was tired, so bone-deep tired, and Eli's eyes held nothing but patience. Okay, she said finally. One step at a time. Eli nodded and turned back to his coffee. But Charlotte caught the ghost of something on his face, relief maybe, or hope, before he hid it away. The doctor came that afternoon, a weathered man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He examined Jacob's feet for a long time, clicking his tongue and muttering to himself while the rest of them waited in tense silence. "The big toes are fine," Dr. Brennan finally announced. "So are most of the others. But this little one here—" He touched the smallest toe on Jacob's left foot, and Jacob winced. "This one's dead. We'll have to take it off." "No." Jacob's voice was small and scared. "I don't want you to take my toe." "I know, son, but if we leave it, it'll turn bad. Make the rest of you sick." The doctor's voice was patient. "It's a small toe. You'll barely miss it." "Will it hurt?" "I'll give you something to bite down on, and I'll be quick." Charlotte stepped forward and took Jacob's hand. "I'll be right here, the whole time. I won't let go." "Promise." "Promise." They sent the other children out of the room, Sam protesting, Emma crying, Lily going without resistance because Lily did everything without resistance now. Agnes held Jacob's shoulders. Charlotte held his hands. Eli stood in the doorway, his face pale but determined. It was over in less than a minute. Jacob screamed once, a high, terrible sound that Charlotte knew she'd hear in her nightmares for years. Then he passed out, and Dr. Brennan finished his work in merciful silence. "He'll sleep for a while," the doctor said, bandaging the wound. "Keep it clean. Change the dressings twice a day. If you see any red streaks or smell anything foul, send for me immediately." "Thank you." Eli's voice was hoarse. "What do I owe you?" "We'll settle up later. Right now, just take care of that boy." Dr. Brennan packed up his bag and paused at the door. "Eli, where did these children come from?" "Found them in the old Morrison cabin during the storm, near frozen to death." "Where are their parents?" "Dead. Their stepmother abandoned them." The doctor's face went through several emotions: shock, horror, rage, before settling into grim resignation. "That's a terrible thing. A terrible thing." He shook his head. "What are you going to do with them?" "Keep them, if they'll stay." "You're a single man, Eli. People will talk." "Let them." Dr. Brennan studied him for a long moment. "You're a good man. Sarah would be proud of you." He tipped his hat and stepped out into the cold. Charlotte, who had been listening from Jacob's bedside, looked up at Eli. "Who's Sarah?" A muscle ticked in Eli's jaw. "My wife. She died 3 years ago." "Agnes told me. About her and your daughter." "Agnes talks too much. She said you've been alone since then, that you work yourself half to death because you can't stand the quiet." Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered land that stretched to the horizon. "Her name was Hope," he said quietly. "My daughter. She was 3 years old when the typhoid took her. Had these big brown eyes just like her mama. Used to follow me around the ranch asking questions about everything." His voice caught. "Why is the sky blue, Papa? Why do horses eat grass? Why does the sun go away at night?" Charlotte didn't know what to say. She'd lost her parents too. Lost everything she'd ever known, but she'd never talked about it like this. Never let anyone see the wound. "I buried them both on the hill behind the house," Eli continued. "Sarah first, then Hope 2 days later. I thought about dying too for a while. Thought about walking out into a storm like the one that brought you here and just not coming back." "Why didn't you—" "Because Sarah would have been ashamed of me. She believed in fighting and surviving and making something good out of whatever life handed you." He turned to face Charlotte. "She would have loved you kids. Would have taken you in without a second thought." "Is that why you're helping us, because of her?" "Partly, but mostly because it's the right thing to do, and I've spent too long doing nothing but surviving." He moved toward the door. "Get some rest. You've had a hard few days." "Eli," Charlotte's voice stopped him. "Thank you for telling me about them." He nodded once, short and sharp, and left the room. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Jacob recovered slowly, spending most of his time in the chair by the stove reading from the books Agnes brought him. Emma attached herself to Agnes like a shadow, following the older woman around the kitchen and absorbing everything she taught: how to knead bread, how to season soup, how to fold napkins into fancy shapes. Sam found his place with the horses. Eli's ranch hands, two Mexican brothers named Miguel and Rafael, let him help with the feeding and grooming, showing him how to approach the animals without spooking them, how to read their moods from the way they held their ears. "The boy's got a gift," Rafael told Eli one evening. "Horses trust him. Don't see that often." "His father worked with animals too," Charlotte said. She'd been listening from the porch, wrapped in one of Agnes's quilts. "Before the mines. He had a small farm in Kansas. What happened to it? Drought. Grasshoppers. Bad luck. Same thing that happens to everyone out here eventually." Raphael nodded, understanding. "The land takes as much as it gives. Sometimes more." Lily remained the puzzle. She ate when food was put in front of her, slept when she was put to bed, moved when she was led somewhere. But she didn't speak, didn't react, didn't engage with anything or anyone except Jacob. Even then, their communication was silent. A hand squeeze, a look, something passing between them that no one else could see. "Has she always been like this?" Agnes asked Charlotte one afternoon. "No. Before yesterday, before Harriet left us, she was normal. Shy, but normal. She talked. She laughed. She played with Emma and got into fights with Jacob about stupid things." Charlotte's voice was hollow. "Then Harriet stopped the wagon and told us to get out, and Lily just stopped. Stopped talking. Stopped everything. It's like she went somewhere inside herself and can't find her way back." Agnes was quiet for a moment. "I've seen that before. During the war, men would come back from battle looking just like that. Present but not present. The doctors called it soldier's heart." "How did they get better?" "Some did. Some didn't." Agnes put a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "Give her time. Give her safety. Sometimes that's all you can do." But time felt like a luxury they didn't have. Word of the abandoned children had spread through Clearwater like wildfire, and with it came opinions. Lots of opinions. The first visitor arrived 4 days after the blizzard. Reverend Nathaniel Porter, a tall man with a stern face and disapproving eyes, rode up to the ranch house like he was on a mission from God. "Mr. Thornton." His voice carried the weight of divine authority. "I've come to discuss the situation with the children." "There's no situation," Eli said flatly. "Just 5 kids who needed help. 5 children living with a single man who is not their father. I'm sure you can understand my concern." "I can understand that you're standing on my porch uninvited, questioning my character." "I'm not questioning your character. I'm questioning the propriety of this arrangement." The Reverend's eyes swept over the house. "Where is the woman, the housekeeper?" "Inside, working. Which is more than I can say for some people." Charlotte had been listening from the window, her stomach tight with dread. This was what she'd been afraid of, the world reaching in to tear apart the fragile safety they'd found. She pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch. "Reverend Porter." The man turned, surprise flickering across his face. "You must be one of the children." "I'm Charlotte Brooks. These are my brothers and sisters. Our father is dead. Our stepmother abandoned us. Mr. Thornton saved our lives." She kept her voice steady, her chin high. "If that's improper, then I don't understand what proper means." "Young lady, you don't understand. I understand that we almost died. I understand that my brother is missing a toe because of frostbite. I understand that my little sister hasn't spoken in 5 days because she's so scared she can't find her voice." Charlotte's hands were shaking, but she didn't stop. "And I understand that you rode out here to tell Mr. Thornton he shouldn't have saved us. So please explain to me what I'm not understanding." The Reverend's face had gone red. "I never said—" "Charlotte." Eli's hand landed on her shoulder, warm and steadying. "Go inside. I'll handle this." "But—" "Inside, now." She went, but she left the door cracked open so she could hear. "Reverend," Eli's voice was cold. "I respect your position in this community. I respect your concern for moral standards. But those children are under my protection. They will stay here until I find them a proper placement, or until they're old enough to decide for themselves where they want to go." "And how long will that take?" "As long as it takes." "The women in town are talking. They say, I don't care what they say. I care about keeping 5 orphans alive through a Wyoming winter." Eli's voice dropped dangerous. "And if anyone in this town tries to interfere with that, anyone, they'll answer to me." The Reverend left without another word. But Charlotte knew it wasn't over. People like him didn't give up so easily. That night, after the children were in bed, Charlotte found Eli sitting alone in the parlor staring into the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, making him look older than his years. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what I said to the Reverend. I shouldn't have spoken to him like that. You said what needed saying. I just wish you didn't have to." "He's going to cause trouble, isn't he?" "Probably." Eli took a long drink from the glass in his hand. Whiskey, Charlotte guessed. She'd seen her father drink enough of it to recognize the smell. But trouble's nothing new. "What happens if they try to take us away? Put us in an orphanage?" "They won't." "But if they try?" "They won't." Eli's voice was firm. "I won't let them." Charlotte moved closer, settling into the chair across from him. "Why do you care so much, really? And don't say it's because of your wife, or because it's the right thing to do. I've heard those reasons. I want the real one." Eli was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because when I found you in that cabin, when I saw you standing there with a knife ready to fight a grown man to protect your family, I saw myself." He met her eyes. "I was 16 when my parents died. Fever same as your mama. I had a little brother Tommy 10 years old, and I would have done anything to keep him safe. Did do things I'm not proud of. What happened to him? He lived, grew up, married a girl from Ohio and moved out there with her. Got 3 kids of his own now." Something softened in Eli's face. "He writes me sometimes, tells me about his life, signs every letter the same way. Thanks for not giving up on me." Charlotte's throat was tight. "So, you're doing for us what you did for him." "I'm doing for you what someone should have done a long time ago." Eli set down his glass. "You shouldn't have had to be the one who kept your family together, Charlotte. You were a child. You deserve to be taken care of, not to be the one doing the taking care of." "Someone had to." "Yeah, but it shouldn't have been you." They sat in silence watching the fire burn low. And Charlotte felt something shift inside her, some wall she'd built so long ago she'd forgotten it was there cracking just a little. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted. "How to stop being the one in charge. I've been doing it so long I don't know how to be anything else." "You don't have to stop completely. Just share the load a little. Let other people help." "What if they let me down?" "Some will, some won't. That's just how people are." Eli stood stretching muscles that had gone stiff from sitting. "But I'm telling you now straight out, I won't let you down. I can't promise I'll do everything right, because I'm making this up as I go, but I won't abandon you, not ever." Charlotte looked up at him, this rough man with the sad eyes who'd walked through a blizzard for strangers. And for the first time in years, she believed someone. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll try. I'll try to let you help. That's all I ask." He left her sitting by the dying fire, her mind spinning with everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. She thought about her father, who'd tried his best and failed. About her mother, who'd loved them fiercely and died too soon. About Harriet, who'd never pretended to love them at all. And about Eli Thornton, who hadn't asked for any of this, but had stepped up anyway. Maybe she thought maybe the world wasn't as cruel as she'd believed. Maybe there were still people worth trusting, still places worth belonging to. Maybe they'd found one. In the room down the hall, Jacob slept with his bandaged foot propped on a pillow. Emma dreamed of bread rising and songs her mother used to sing. Sam lay awake thinking about horses and the men who'd shown him kindness. And Lily, silent, broken. Lily sat by the window with her ragged doll watching the stars come out one by one. She didn't speak, didn't move, but somewhere deep inside her, in a place no one could see, a small spark flickered. Not hope, not yet. But something close. Something that might, with time and patience and love, grow into something more. 2 weeks passed, and the ranch began to feel less like a stranger's house, and more like something Charlotte couldn't quite name. She noticed it in small ways. The creak of the third stair that she automatically skipped now. The spot at the kitchen table that had become hers without anyone assigning it. The way Agnes's voice calling them for supper had started to feel familiar instead of foreign. It terrified her. "You're thinking too loud again." Sam's voice broke through her thoughts. He was sitting across from her at the breakfast table, shoveling eggs into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. "I can practically hear your brain grinding. Mind your own business. You are my business. You're my sister." He pointed his fork at her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." "Liar." Charlotte shot him a look that would have silenced him a month ago. Now he just grinned, egg stuck in his teeth, and went back to eating. He'd changed since they'd come here. Filled out a little. Started standing straighter. Started talking back. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad. "Charlotte." Eli's voice came from the doorway. "When you're done, I need your help with the books." "The books?" "Ranch accounts. Agnes says you're good with numbers." Charlotte felt her cheeks warm. She was good with numbers, had been keeping her father's accounts since she was 9, but she hadn't expected anyone here to notice or care. "I can help," she said carefully. "If you really want me to." "Wouldn't ask if I didn't." Eli poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Sam Miguel's waiting for you in the barn. Something about that mare you've been working with?" Sam was up and out of his chair before Eli finished speaking, his plate forgotten. The door slammed behind him, letting in a blast of cold air that made Emma shiver. "He's going to freeze if he keeps running out without his coat," Agnes muttered, but there was fondness in her voice. "He'll learn." Eli's eyes followed Sam through the window. "Or he won't, and he'll freeze. Either way, lesson learned." Charlotte couldn't help it. She laughed. It came out before she could stop it, rusty and strange, and everyone in the kitchen went still. "What?" She felt her face heating up. "What are you all looking at?" "Nothing." But Eli was almost smiling. "Just haven't heard that sound from you before. It's nice." Charlotte didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. She just finished her breakfast and followed Eli to his study, where ledgers and receipts were spread across the desk, in a chaos that made her fingers itch to organize. "It's a mess," Eli admitted. "Sarah used to handle all this. After she died, I just let it pile up. 3 years of piled up accounts. Closer to 4 if I'm honest." Charlotte stared at the mountain of paper. Part of her wanted to run. The other part, the part that had kept her father's books balanced through drought and debt and disaster, saw a challenge. "I'll need a system," she said slowly. "Categories for income and expenses. A timeline. And you'll have to answer questions when I have them. Whatever you need. This could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks." Eli moved toward the door, then paused. "Charlotte, thank you. I know you don't have to do this. You saved our lives. The least I can do is add some numbers." "That's not—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind. Just thank you." He left her alone with the ledgers, and Charlotte got to work. The days took on a new shape after that. Mornings were for chores. Charlotte helped Agnes with cooking and cleaning, while Sam worked with the horses, and Emma learned to sew. Afternoons, Charlotte spent in the study, slowly untangling years of neglected paperwork, while Eli checked on her progress and answered her questions. They talked during those sessions. Not about anything important at first, just ranch business cattle prices, the cost of feed. But slowly, carefully, the conversations deepened. "How did you meet your wife?" Charlotte asked one afternoon, not looking up from the ledger she was reconciling. Eli was quiet for so long, she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, church social. She spilled punch on my best shirt and spent the next hour apologizing. I told her she could make it up to me by dancing. She said she didn't dance with clumsy men. I said I wasn't the one who'd done the spilling. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. We danced 3 times that night, married 6 months later. That's fast. When you know, you know. At least that's what Sarah said. I thought she was crazy, but she was right about most things, so I figured she was probably right about that too. Charlotte made a note in the ledger, her handwriting careful and precise. Do you think you'll marry again? Hadn't thought about it. The women in town have. She'd heard the whispers when they'd gone to Clearwater for supplies, seen the way certain ladies looked at Eli and the way they looked at her and her siblings. Mrs. Patterson asked Agnes if you were courting anyone. Mrs. Whitmore said you'd make a fine catch if you'd just smile more. Eli made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. Those women have been trying to marry me off since before Sarah was cold in the ground. They don't care about me, they care about this ranch. It's a good ranch. It's a lot of work is what it is. He stood moving to the window. And even if I wanted to remarry, which I don't, what woman would take on 5 children who aren't hers? The words landed like stones. Charlotte felt them in her chest, heavy and cold. We're a burden, she said flatly. That's what you're saying. What no? Eli turned sharply. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. I said... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I said it wrong. I meant that most women wouldn't. They'd see 5 children as too much responsibility, but that's their failing, not yours. Harriet saw us as too much responsibility. That's why she left us to die. Harriet was a monster. Don't compare yourself to what she thought of you. Charlotte set down her pen. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't know if it was anger or fear or something else entirely. What do you think of us? She asked quietly. Really? Not the polite version. The truth. Eli was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I think you're the bravest people I've ever met. All 5 of you. I think you've survived things that would break most adults, and you're still standing, still fighting. He moved closer, crouching down so he was at her eye level. I think I didn't know how empty this house was until you filled it up. And I think... His voice caught. I think if I lost you now, it would be like losing Sarah and Hope all over again. Charlotte felt tears burning in her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. You barely know us. I know enough. Eli straightened. I know Jacob laughs in his sleep. I know Emma hums when she's happy. I know Sam talks to the horses like they understand him, and half the time I think they do. I know Lily hasn't said a word in 3 weeks, but she watches everything, takes it all in, and someday when she's ready, she's going to have a lot to say. And me, you. Eli's eyes met hers. I know you've been carrying the weight of the world since you were 7 years old, and you're so used to it, you don't even know how to put it down. I know you don't trust easily, and when you do trust, you trust completely. I know you're scared right now, scared that this is all going to fall apart, scared that I'm going to leave like everyone else. Charlotte's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. Are you? No. The word was simple, absolute. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, not unless you want to. She didn't know who moved first. One moment they were standing apart, and the next, Charlotte was in Eli's arms, crying against his chest, while he held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. It was the first time she'd let anyone hold her since her mother died. The moment broke when footsteps thundered through the house. Sam burst into the study, his face flushed with excitement. "Eli, Charlotte! You have to come see this!" Charlotte pulled back, wiping her face. "What is it?" "It's Lily. She's just come. Hurry." They followed Sam through the house, out the back door, across the yard to the barn. Inside, the air was warm with animal heat and the smell of hay. Miguel and Raphael stood near the back stall, and between them Charlotte's heart stopped. Lily was standing in front of a newborn foal, her hand outstretched, her fingers brushing its velvet nose. The foal was tiny, barely an hour old, still wobbly on its legs. Its mother stood nearby, watching with the patient wariness of all new mothers. But that wasn't what made Charlotte's breath catch. Lily was talking. "You're okay," she was whispering, so quiet Charlotte almost couldn't hear. "You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you. I promise. I'll take care of you." "Madre de Dios," Raphael breathed. "She speaks." Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence, of absence, of watching her baby sister disappear into herself. And now, standing in a barn with a newborn horse, Lily had finally found her way back. "Lily," Charlotte whispered. Lily turned. Her eyes, those blue eyes that had been so empty, were bright now, alive in a way Charlotte had almost forgotten they could be. "Charlie?" Her voice was rusty from disuse. "Look, she was born all alone and her mama didn't know what to do. But Miguel helped and now she's okay." Lily's hand kept stroking the foal's nose. She needed someone to tell her she was safe, just like us. Charlotte crossed the barn and knelt beside her sister, pulling her into an embrace that Lily didn't resist. "I thought I lost you," Charlotte choked out. "I thought you were gone forever." "I wasn't gone. I was just hiding. Inside my head where it's quiet." Lily's small arms wrapped around Charlotte's neck. "But I heard you, every day, telling me it was safe, telling me to come back when I was ready." "Are you ready now?" Lily pulled back just enough to look at the foal at the barn, at the life that had somehow impossibly become theirs. "I think so," she said. "I think I want to stay here, with the horses and Agnes and Eli. Can we stay, Charlie? Can this be our home?" Charlotte looked over Lily's shoulder at Eli, who stood in the barn doorway with Sam and Jacob and Emma clustered around him. His face was wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "Yeah," Charlotte said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yeah, I think it can." The next few days were different, lighter. Lily still didn't talk much. She'd used up 3 weeks of words in that one moment, but she was present in a way she hadn't been before. She named the foal Star for the white mark on its forehead and spent every spare moment in the barn watching it grow stronger. Jacob was thrilled to have his twin back. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. They communicated in that silent way they always had, and Charlotte stopped trying to understand it. The peace lasted until Sunday. "We should go to church," Agnes said over breakfast. "It's been a month since you arrived. People are starting to talk." "People are always talking," Eli muttered. "Yes, and if we don't give them something good to talk about, they'll make up something bad." Agnes fixed him with a stern look. "I know you hate putting yourself on display, but those children need to be seen by the community. They need to belong somewhere. They belong here. Here isn't enough. They need to belong out there too, or they'll always be outsiders." Agnes turned to Charlotte. "What do you think?" Charlotte considered. She hated the idea of being stared at, whispered about, judged. But Agnes was right. If they were going to build a life in Clearwater, they needed the town to accept them. "We should go," she said finally. "All of us." The church was packed when they arrived. Every pew was full, and every head turned when Eli Thornton walked through the door with 5 children trailing behind him. Charlotte kept her chin up and her eyes forward. She'd faced worse than curious stares. She'd faced abandonment and starvation, and the slow death of her brother's toe. A few townspeople couldn't hurt her, but Reverend Porter could try. "Brothers and sisters," he began once everyone was seated. "I want to speak today about the importance of proper Christian households, about the structures God intended for family and community." Charlotte felt Eli stiffen beside her. She reached over and took his hand without thinking, and felt him squeeze back. "A Christian household requires order," the Reverend continued. "A father to lead a mother to nurture children to obey. When this order is disrupted, chaos follows. Sin follows." His eyes swept the congregation and landed on Eli. "Some in our community have taken it upon themselves to disrupt this order, to create households that do not conform to God's design." A murmur ran through the crowd. Charlotte saw heads turning, eyes finding them, mouths moving behind hands. "I'm not saying these people have bad intentions," Porter continued. "I'm saying that good intentions are not enough. A single man cannot raise children alone. It isn't proper, it isn't natural, and it isn't what God intended." "That's enough." The voice came from the back of the church. Everyone turned to see a woman standing, Margaret Brennan, the doctor's wife, her face flushed with anger. "Those children were left to die in a blizzard," she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "Eli Thornton saved their lives, and you're standing up there telling us he did wrong. I'm saying there are proper channels. Proper channels would have put them in an orphanage, separated them, sent them to strangers who don't care whether they live or die." Mrs. Brennan stepped into the aisle. "I've seen what happens to children in those places. My sister runs one in Denver. The stories she tells would make your hair curl." Another voice joined hers. "My brother was in an orphanage after our parents died. They beat him so bad he couldn't walk right for a year." And another. "Those children needed help. Eli gave it. What's unchristian about that?" The murmurs were growing louder now, and not all of them were against the Reverend. Charlotte could see the congregation splitting, some nodding, along with the supporters. Others shaking their heads, mouths tight with disapproval. Eli stood. The room went silent. "Reverend Porter," he said, his voice calm but carrying. "You're right that I'm not the perfect guardian for these children. I don't know the first thing about raising kids. I make mistakes every day. I'm figuring it out as I go." He paused, looking around the church at the faces watching him. "But I know what abandonment does to a child. I know what it feels like to have no one. And I know that when I found 5 kids freezing to death in a broken-down cabin, the right thing to do wasn't to walk away." His hand found Charlotte's shoulder, and she felt strength flowing through the contact. "If you want to judge me for that, go ahead. If you want to gossip about whether it's proper or natural or what God intended, be my guest. But those children are alive today because I chose to help them. And I'd make the same choice again 100 times over, no matter what any of you think." He sat back down. Charlotte's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The Reverend opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, another voice cut through the silence. "I'd like to say something." It was Charlotte. She was standing before she'd made the conscious decision to stand, her legs shaking, her voice trembling but clear. "I'm Charlotte Brooks. I'm 12 years old. My mother died when I was 7. My father died 4 months ago. My stepmother loaded us in a wagon and left us in a blizzard because she didn't want to feed us anymore." She looked around the church, meeting eyes that flinched away from hers. "I've been taking care of my brothers and sisters since I was 7 years old. I've gone hungry so they could eat. I've worked until my hands bled to keep them safe. I've done everything I know how to do, and it still almost wasn't enough." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Eli Thornton didn't have to help us. He could have ridden past that cabin and never looked back. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have cared. But he stopped. He came in. He carried my brother through a blizzard because a 5-year-old boy was dying, and he couldn't just let that happen." Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. "So when you sit here and talk about what's proper and what's natural and what God intended, I want you to remember something. God put us in that cabin. God sent that blizzard. And God sent Eli Thornton to save us. Her voice rose. If that's not part of his plan, then I don't know what is. She sat down, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Eli's arm came around her shoulders, steady and warm. The church was utterly silent. Then from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. It spread like wildfire. More hands joined in, more voices rising in approval. Not everyone Charlotte could see. The tight faces, the crossed arms, but enough. Enough to drown out the disapproval, at least for now. Reverend Porter stood at his pulpit. His sermon derailed his authority. Challenged. He looked at Eli, at Charlotte, at the congregation that had turned against him. "We will," he said stiffly, "continue this discussion at another time. Let us pray." Charlotte bowed her head with everyone else, but she wasn't praying. She was thinking about what had just happened, about the people who had stood up for them, about the battle that wasn't over, but that they'd somehow impossibly started to win. After the service, people approached them, some with words of encouragement, some with offers of help, some just wanting to shake Eli's hand or pat Charlotte on the back. Mrs. Brennan hugged her so tight Charlotte couldn't breathe. "You brave girl," the woman whispered. "You wonderful brave girl." But not everyone was kind. Charlotte saw the looks, heard the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough. The battle wasn't won. It was just beginning. On the ride home, Emma fell asleep against Agnes's shoulder. Sam stared out at the passing landscape, lost in thought. Jacob and Lily sat together, their fingers intertwined, their silent communication flowing between them. Charlotte sat beside Eli at the front of the wagon, watching the road unfold before them. "You didn't have to do that," Eli said quietly. "Stand up like that. Speak for us." "Yes, I did. It was brave. It was terrifying." Charlotte's hands were still shaking. "But someone had to say it. And I figured, I'm good with words, just like I'm good with numbers." Eli was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're good at a lot of things, Charlotte Brooks. Most of them things you shouldn't have had to learn so young." "Maybe, but I learned them anyway, and now I get to use them for something that matters." She looked back at her siblings, at Sam, who'd found purpose with the horses, at Emma, who'd found love in Agnes's kitchen, at Jacob and Lily, who'd found each other again, at the family they'd built from the wreckage of the one they'd lost. "I think we're going to be okay," she said softly. "I really think we might be okay." Eli didn't answer. He just reached over and squeezed her hand, and Charlotte let herself believe for the first time in months that maybe the worst was behind them. She was wrong, of course. The worst was still coming, but she didn't know that yet. The worst came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Charlotte was in the study finishing the last of Eli's accounts. 3 months of work, countless hours of sorting and calculating, and she'd finally brought order to the chaos. She felt proud of that, proud of something she'd accomplished, not just something she'd survived. "You look pleased with yourself." Eli stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand. "I finished." Charlotte held up the ledger. "Every account reconciled, every receipt filed. You're actually in better shape than you thought. Turned a profit last year, even with the cattle losses." "Is that so?" Eli crossed to look over her shoulder, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the columns. "I'll be damned." Sarah would have been impressed. "She kept good records before. I just had to find the pattern." "You did more than that." Eli's hand landed briefly on her shoulder. "You did something I couldn't. Thank you." Charlotte felt warmth spreading through her chest. 3 months ago she would have flinched from that touch, would have dismissed the praise. Now she just smiled. "Someone's coming." Sam's voice carried from the front room. "A wagon heading up the drive." Charlotte's stomach tightened. Visitors were still a source of anxiety, even after the church confrontation had settled into an uneasy truce. Most people had come around, or at least stopped being openly hostile. But there were still those who looked at them sideways, still whispers that fell silent when they entered a room. She followed Eli to the front porch, the others gathering behind them. Agnes stood with Emma, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. Sam positioned himself near Jacob and Lily, the way he always did now, ready to grab them and run if needed. The wagon rolled closer, and Charlotte felt ice forming in her veins. She knew that wagon. Knew the way it listed slightly to the left, knew the patched canvas covering the back. She knew the thin figure holding the reins, the sharp angles of her face, the way she sat ramrod straight like she had a broomstick shoved up her spine. No. The word came out before Charlotte could stop it. No, no, no. Charlotte. Eli's voice was sharp. Who is that? Harriet. Charlotte's hands were shaking. That's Harriet. The wagon stopped 20 feet from the porch. Harriet Simmons climbed down with the careful movements of a woman who knew she was being watched. She wore black, she always wore black, and her face was arranged in an expression Charlotte had seen 100 times before. Concern. Motherly worry. The mask she put on when other people were watching. My children. Harriet's voice carried across the yard, pitched high with manufactured relief. Oh, thank God you're safe. She started toward them, arms outstretched, and Charlotte felt her body moving before her mind caught up. She stepped in front of her siblings, blocking them from view. Don't! Her voice was low and deadly. Don't you dare! Harriet stopped. The mask flickered just for a second before sliding back into place. Charlotte, sweetheart, I know you must be confused. I'm not confused. I remember everything. Charlotte's fists were clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. I remember you stopping that wagon. I remember you telling us to wait inside. I remember watching you drive away while my brother was freezing to death. There was a misunderstanding. You left us to die. The words rang across the yard. Behind Charlotte, Emma started crying. Jacob grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her closer. Sam stepped forward to stand beside Charlotte, his jaw set. Ma'am. Eli's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I think you'd better explain yourself. Harriet's eyes moved to him, calculating, assessing. Charlotte could practically see her adjusting her approach, selecting the right weapon from her arsenal. You must be Mr. Thornton. Harriet's voice softened, became almost grateful. I can't thank you enough for taking care of my stepchildren. I've been searching for them for months. Months? Eli's tone was flat. The blizzard was 3 months ago. You're telling me it took you this long to find them? I was ill. The cold, I nearly died myself. By the time I recovered, they were gone. I've been traveling from town to town, asking everywhere, hoping and praying. Stop. Charlotte's voice shook with fury. Stop lying. You weren't sick. You weren't searching. You left us and you never looked back. Charlotte, I understand you're upset. Upset. I'm not upset. I'm furious. Charlotte took a step forward, and something in her face made Harriet retreat. You took everything our parents left us. You sold our house, our furniture, our mother's china. Then you loaded us in that wagon like cargo and dumped us in an abandoned cabin during the worst blizzard in 20 years. That's not... My brother lost a toe. My sister stopped talking for 3 weeks. I held Jacob in my arms while he was dying, while he told me he could see our mother calling him home. Charlotte's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. And you have the nerve to stand here and pretend you were worried about us. The yard had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Harriet's mask was cracking. Charlotte could see the real woman underneath, cold, calculating, cornered. I made a mistake, Harriet said finally. A terrible mistake. But I'm here now. I want to make things right. How? Eli asked. How exactly do you plan to make this right? By taking my children home, of course. Harriet straightened, gathering the shreds of her dignity. I appreciate what you've done for them, Mr. Thornton, but they're my responsibility. My late husband's children. It's only proper that they return to their family. Their family. Charlotte laughed, and there was no humor in it. We're not your family. We were never your family. You made that perfectly clear when you abandoned us. The law sees it differently. Harriet's voice had gone cold, the pretense falling away. As their stepmother, I have legal rights. I can petition the court for their return. On what grounds? Eli's voice was dangerous now. Abandonment isn't exactly a strong basis for custody. Abandonment, I have witnesses who will testify I was delirious from fever, that I wandered away from the wagon in confusion and the children got lost in the storm. A tragic accident, nothing more. That's a lie. Prove it. Harriet's smile was razor thin. It's your word against mine. And who do you think the court will believe, a grieving widow searching for her lost children, or a single man who's been keeping 5 orphans in his house for 3 months? Charlotte felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Harriet was right. The law didn't care about truth. The law cared about appearances, about propriety, about what looked right to the people making decisions. What do you really want? Eli asked quietly. Because we both know it's not these children. Harriet's eyes narrowed. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, $1,500, cash, and I'll sign over any legal claim to them. You can adopt them properly, do whatever you want. I'll disappear and never come back. You're selling them. Charlotte's voice was hollow. Like livestock. I'm offering a practical solution. Harriet's tone was businesslike. You want them. I don't. There's a price for making that permanent. $1,500 seems reasonable for 5 healthy children. Get off my property. Eli's voice was barely controlled. Get off my property before I do something we'll both regret. Mr. Thornton, be reasonable. I said get off. Eli stepped forward, and his size, his height, his breadth, the coiled violence in his shoulders seemed to fill the entire yard. You have until the count of 10 to get in that wagon and drive away. If you're still here when I reach 10, I won't be responsible for what happens. Harriet held her ground for a moment, her jaw tight. Then slowly, she retreated to the wagon. This isn't over, she called as she climbed onto the seat. I'll be back with a sheriff and a court order. We'll see how protective you feel then. She snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched into motion. Charlotte watched it disappear down the road, her whole body trembling. Inside. Eli's voice was gentle now. Everyone inside. We need to talk. They gathered in the parlor, Eli, Agnes, Charlotte, and Sam. The younger children had been sent to their rooms with Emma in charge. But Charlotte knew they were listening at the door. They always were. She's going to do it, Charlotte said. She's going to go to court, and she might win. She won't win. Eli's voice was firm, but Charlotte heard the uncertainty underneath. You don't know that. You heard what she said. It's her word against ours, and we're just children. Who's going to believe us? I believe you. Agnes spoke up. And so will anyone with eyes to see. That woman is poison. The court doesn't care about poison. The court cares about law. Charlotte had learned that lesson young, watching her father fight creditors and landlords, and everyone else who wanted to take what was theirs. And the law says she's our stepmother. She has rights. Rights she forfeited when she left you in that cabin. Eli was pacing now, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. There has to be a way. Something we can do. Pay her. Sam's voice was quiet. That's what she wants. Pay her and make it go away. $1,500 is a lot of money. You have it. Charlotte looked at Eli. I've seen the accounts. You could pay her. I'm not rewarding that woman for what she did. It's not about rewarding her. It's about protecting us. Charlotte's voice cracked. Please, Eli. I don't care about the money. I don't care about what's fair. I just want this to be over. I want to stop being afraid. Eli stopped pacing. He looked at Charlotte. Really looked at her, seeing the fear beneath her composure, the desperation behind her words. You really think that's the answer? Pay her off? I think it's the fastest answer, the safest answer. Charlotte swallowed hard. I know it's not right. I know she doesn't deserve it. But if we fight her in court, even if we win, it could take months, years, and the whole time we'd be waiting, wondering, looking over our shoulders. And if we pay her, she disappears. She gets what she wants. We get what we want. Everyone walks away. Charlotte's hands were twisting in her lap. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same thing. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Agnes. What do you think? I think that girl has more wisdom than most adults. Agnes's voice was heavy, and I hate that she's right. The next morning, Eli rode into town alone. Charlotte wanted to go with him, but he wouldn't allow it. You stay here, he said. Keep the others calm. I'll handle Harriet. What if she won't take it? What if she wants more? Then I'll deal with that too. He swung onto his horse, looking down at her. Trust me, Charlotte. Can you do that? She nodded, though her stomach was churning. Be careful. Always am. She watched him ride away, then went inside to wait. The waiting was agony. Charlotte tried to work on the accounts, but her mind wouldn't focus. She tried to help Agnes with lunch, but her hands shook too badly to be useful. Finally, she just sat in the parlor staring at the window, counting the minutes. He'll come back. Sam dropped onto the couch beside her. Eli's not the type to lose. Everyone loses sometimes. Not today. Today we win. Sam's voice was fierce with certainty. Because we have to. Because there's no other option. Charlotte looked at her brother, 10 years old, too young to have learned such hard lessons, too old to have kept his innocence. When did you grow up? She asked softly. Same time you did, when we didn't have a choice. Sam reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. We're going to be okay, Charlie, whatever happens, because we've got each other. She squeezed back, holding on tight. Eli didn't return until sunset. Charlotte heard the hoofbeats first, then saw him cresting the ridge silhouetted against the orange sky. She was out the door before she could think, running across the yard, not caring how it looked. What happened? She grabbed his horse's bridle as he dismounted. Did you see her? Is it done? It's done. Eli's voice was flat, exhausted. She signed the papers. She's leaving tomorrow on the morning stage to Denver. She took the money. She took the money. He pulled a folded document from his pocket. This gives me legal guardianship. She surrendered all parental rights. It's over, Charlotte. It's really over. Charlotte stared at the paper in his hand. Such a small thing to represent something so enormous. $1,500. Her voice was hollow. That's what we were worth to her. No. Eli's hand came up, cupping her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. That's what it cost to get rid of her. That's not the same as what you're worth. Not even close. How do you know? How do you know we're worth anything more? Because I would have paid twice that. 3 times. Everything I have. His voice was raw. Because when I think about what my life was like before you came, I can't remember why I bothered living it. Because you and your brothers and sisters made me remember what it feels like to have something worth fighting for. Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't wipe them away. I was so scared, she whispered. So scared she was going to take us. That we'd lose everything again. I know. But she's gone now. She can't hurt you anymore. Eli pulled her into a hug, and Charlotte let herself collapse against him. Let herself be held. Let herself feel safe. You're my family now, all of you, and I protect my family. They stayed like that for a long moment, the sunset fading around them. Then Charlotte pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. We should tell the others. We should. But Eli didn't move. Charlotte, there's something else. Her stomach dropped. What? While I was in town, I went to see Judge Crawford. Asked about making things more permanent. He took a breath. I want to adopt you. All 5 of you, legally, officially, forever. If you'll have me." Charlotte's heart stopped. "You want to adopt us?" "I know it's sudden. I know you've got reasons not to trust adults who make promises. But I'm not making a promise, I'm making a choice. I choose you. I choose this family. And I want the law to recognize that choice." What about what people think? What about propriety? Damn propriety. The curse sounded strange coming from Eli, who never swore. "I'm tired of caring what people think. I care about you. I care about keeping you safe. Everything else can go to hell." Charlotte thought about everything they'd been through. The abandonment, the blizzard, the weeks of uncertainty, the church confrontation, Harriet's return. She thought about her siblings, Sam finding purpose with the horses, Emma flourishing under Agnes's care, Jacob healing Lily finally coming back to them. She thought about Eli, who'd walked through a blizzard for strangers and become something she'd never expected to find again. A father. "Yes," she said, and her voice only trembled a little. "Yes, we'll have you." Eli's face broke into a smile, a real smile, the kind Charlotte had never seen from him before. "Good," he said. "That's good." They walked into the house together, and Charlotte felt something shift inside her. The fear that had been her constant companion for years, the terror of being abandoned, being unwanted, being thrown away, didn't disappear. Maybe it never would completely, but it was quieter now, smaller, crowded out by something stronger. Hope. The others were waiting in the kitchen, their faces anxious. Charlotte looked at them, at Sam standing protectively near the door, at Emma clutching Agnes's hand, at Jacob, and Lily pressed together like two halves of a whole. Her family, her responsibility, her reason for fighting. "She's gone," Charlotte said. "Harriet's gone. She signed the papers. It's over." The silence lasted 1 heartbeat. 2. Then Emma burst into tears and threw herself at Charlotte. Sam let out a whoop that startled the chickens outside. Jacob grabbed Lily and spun her around while she laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. "There's more," Charlotte continued over the chaos. "Eli wants to adopt us, make it legal, make us really his." The room went still again. "All of us," Sam's voice was careful, guarded. "Or just some of us, all of you." Eli stepped forward. "Every single one, if you want it." Sam looked at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at Sam. Some silent communication passed between them, the same wordless understanding they'd developed over years of taking care of each other. "We want it," Sam said quietly. "We've wanted it since the day you brought us here." Emma was crying harder now, but they were happy tears. Jacob was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. Even Lily was smiling, her fingers wrapped tight around her brother's hand. Agnes dabbed at her eyes with her apron. "Well," she said, her voice suspiciously thick, "I suppose we'd better start planning a celebration dinner." That night, after the younger ones were in bed, Charlotte sat with Eli on the porch. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I keep waiting to wake up," Charlotte said softly. "Keep waiting for something to go wrong. Something will go wrong eventually. That's just life." Eli's voice was calm, accepting. "But we'll handle it. Together." "You really think we can do this, be a real family?" "I think we already are." He glanced at her. "What do you think?" Charlotte considered the question. A year ago, she would have said family was blood. The people you were born to, the people who were supposed to love you no matter what. But blood hadn't saved her mother from fever. Blood hadn't kept her father from dying in a mine shaft. Blood hadn't stopped Harriet from leaving them to freeze. Maybe family was something else. Maybe it was the people who chose to stay. "I think," she said slowly, "that I spent a long time believing I didn't deserve good things. That if I wanted something too much, it would be taken away. That hope was just another word for disappointment waiting to happen. And now, Now I'm sitting on a porch with a man who walked through a blizzard for strangers, who paid $1,500 to a monster so he could keep us, who's planning to adopt 5 children because he wants to, not because he has to. Charlotte's voice was steady. I think maybe I was wrong about hope. Eli didn't say anything. He just reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and solid in the darkness. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, feeling the weight of the past beginning finally to lift. The adoption hearing was set for the first Tuesday of March, exactly 4 months after Eli had found them in that broken-down cabin. Charlotte spent the morning helping the younger ones get ready, checking buttons and straightening collars, and making sure everyone's hair was combed properly. She told herself she was being practical, that first impressions mattered, that the judge would notice if they looked unkempt, but really, she just needed something to do with her hands. "You're fussing," Sam said, pushing away her fingers as she tried to adjust his tie for the 3rd time. "I look fine. You look like you got dressed in the dark. I look like a 10-year-old boy who doesn't care about ties." But he let her fix it anyway, standing still while she worked. "You nervous?" "No." Liar. Charlotte's hands stilled on his collar. "Terrified," she admitted quietly. "What if something goes wrong? What if the judge says no? He won't. But what if he does? Then we run." Sam's voice was matter-of-fact. "We grab the little ones, and we disappear into the mountains, and we never come back. I've been studying the maps in Eli's study. I know where we could go." Charlotte stared at her brother. "You've been planning escape routes. I've been planning everything, just in case." His jaw tightened. "I won't let them separate us. I won't let anyone take us away from here. Not ever again." "Sam." Charlotte pulled him into a hug, holding tight. "It's not going to come to that. Today's going to be fine. More than fine. Today's going to be the start of something good. Promise?" "Promise." She hoped she wasn't lying. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Word had spread through Clearwater about the adoption hearing, and it seemed like half the town had turned out to watch. Charlotte saw familiar faces in the crowd, Mrs. Brennan, who'd stood up for them in church. The shopkeeper, who always gave Emma extra candy. The blacksmith who'd taught Sam how to shoe a horse. But she also saw the others. The tight-lipped women who whispered behind their hands. Reverend Porter sitting in the front row with his arms crossed. The people who still believed a single man had no business raising children, no matter what the circumstances. Ignore them. Eli's voice was low, meant only for her. Focus on what matters. What if the judge listens to them instead of us? Then we'll deal with that, but I don't think he will. Eli's hand found her shoulder, squeezing gently. Judge Crawford is a fair man. He'll see the truth. They took their seats at the front of the courtroom. Charlotte sat between Sam and Emma, with Jacob and Lily on Emma's other side. Eli sat at the end, close enough to reach if any of them needed him. Agnes had stayed home. Someone had to watch the ranch, but she'd hugged each of them before they left, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You come back a real family," she'd said. "That's an order." Judge William Crawford entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. He was older than Charlotte had expected, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that swept over the crowd before settling on the children. "Be seated," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "We're here today to consider the petition of Elijah Thornton for legal adoption of Charlotte, Samuel, Emma Jacob, and Lily Brooks. Is the petitioner present? I am, Your Honor." Eli stood. "And the children?" Charlotte rose, pulling the others up with her. "We're here, sir." The judge studied them for a long moment. Charlotte couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was sympathetic or skeptical or something else entirely. "I've reviewed the documentation," Judge Crawford said finally. "The circumstances are unusual. A single man seeking to adopt 5 children, including 3 girls of varying ages. You understand my concerns. I do, Your Honor. And yet you persist in this petition." "I do." Eli's voice was steady. "Those children need a home. I have one to offer. The rest is just paperwork." A murmur ran through the crowd. The judge raised an eyebrow. Just paperwork. An interesting perspective. He shuffled through the papers before him. "I have here statements from several members of the community expressing concern about the propriety of this arrangement. Reverend Porter in particular has been quite vocal." Charlotte felt her stomach drop. Of course Porter had written something. Of course he'd tried to sabotage them, even after everything. "I've also received statements in support of the petition," the judge continued. "From Dr. Brennan, who treated the youngest boy's frostbite. From Margaret Brennan, who observed the children's condition when they first arrived. From several ranch hands who work for Mr. Thornton." He looked up. "It seems this case has divided the community." "With respect, Your Honor." Eli's voice was tight. "The community's opinion shouldn't determine whether these children have a home." "No, it shouldn't." The judge set down the papers. "Which is why I'd like to hear from the children themselves. Charlotte Brooks, please approach." Charlotte's legs felt like water as she walked to the front of the courtroom. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the whispers starting up again. But she kept her chin up and her back straight the way Mama had taught her. "Miss Brooks?" The judge's voice was surprisingly gentle. "You're the eldest of the 5 children, is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you've been caring for your siblings since your mother's death?" "Since I was 7, sir. After Mama died, someone had to make sure the little ones were fed and clean and safe. Pa tried, but he was grieving and working and drinking. So I did what needed doing." "That's a heavy burden for a child." "I didn't have a choice." The judge nodded slowly. "Tell me about the day your stepmother left you." Charlotte had known this question was coming, had prepared for it, rehearsed the words in her head 100 times. But now, standing in this courtroom with everyone watching, the memories hit her like a physical blow. "It was snowing," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Had been snowing for hours. Harriet stopped the wagon near an old cabin and told us to get out. Said she needed to check something inside. And then she told us to wait, said she'd be right back." Charlotte's throat tightened. I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, but I didn't know what to do. She was a grown woman. She had the law on her side. We were just children. "What happened next?" "She drove away. We watched the wagon disappear into the snow, and we went inside the cabin to wait." Charlotte's voice cracked. "We waited for hours. Jacob almost died. Lily stopped talking. And we would have frozen to death if Eli hadn't found us." The courtroom was silent. Charlotte could see tears on some faces, hard anger on others. "Miss Brooks." The judge leaned forward. "Do you want to be adopted by Mr. Thornton?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. She'd expected to be asked if she was being treated well, if she was fed and clothed and educated. She hadn't expected to be asked why she wanted this. "Because he stopped," Charlotte said finally. "Because he was out in that blizzard looking for lost cattle, and he could have ridden right past that cabin without ever knowing we were there. But he saw a light and he stopped. He came inside and he found 5 children who'd been thrown away like garbage, and he didn't turn away." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "He carried my brother through a blizzard. He paid for a doctor. He gave us food and clothes and beds and books. He let us into his home, into his life, even though we were strangers, even though it would have been easier to hand us off to someone else." Charlotte looked at Eli sitting with her siblings, his face tight with emotion. "He didn't have to love us," she said. "He didn't have to choose us. But he did. And that matters more than blood, more than propriety, more than anything anyone in this town thinks about what's proper, or natural, or right." She turned back to the judge. "He's our father. Maybe not by birth, but by choice. And I want the law to recognize that." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Thank you, Miss Brooks. You may return to your seat." Charlotte walked back to her place, her legs shaking. Emma grabbed her hand as she sat down, squeezing tight. "That was amazing. Emma whispered. That was terrifying. Same thing. The judge called each of the other children forward in turn. Sam spoke about learning to work with horses, about finding purpose and direction for the first time in his life. Emma talked about Agnes teaching her to cook, about feeling safe enough to be a child again. Jacob, still limping slightly from his lost toe, described how Eli had sat with him every night during his recovery reading stories until he fell asleep. And then it was Lily's turn. Charlotte held her breath as her youngest sister approached the bench. Lily had been talking more in recent weeks, but she was still fragile, still prone to retreating into silence when overwhelmed. Miss Brooks? The judge's voice was gentle. I understand you had some difficulty after your stepmother left you. Lily nodded, her fingers wrapped tight around the ragged doll she still carried everywhere. Can you tell me about it? For a long moment, Lily didn't speak. Charlotte started to rise, ready to intervene, but then Lily's voice came small but clear. I went away, she said, inside my head, where it was quiet and nothing could hurt me. And what brought you back? The horse. A ghost of a smile crossed Lily's face. Star. She was born all alone, and she was scared, and she needed someone to tell her it was safe. So I told her. And then I remembered that I was safe too. She looked at Eli. Because of him. Because he found us and kept us and made this place feel like home. Do you want to be adopted by Mr. Thornton? Yes. Lily's voice was stronger now. I want to stay here forever, with my brothers and sisters and Agnes and Miguel and Raphael and the horses. This is where I belong. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Brooks. You may return to your seat. After all the children had spoken, the judge turned to Eli. Mr. Thornton, you've heard the testimony. You understand the weight of what you're asking for. I do, Your Honor. 5 children is a significant responsibility. They'll need education, clothing, food, medical care. As they grow older, there will be challenges you can't anticipate. Are you prepared for that? No. Eli's answer surprised everyone, including Charlotte. I'm not prepared. I don't know the first thing about raising children. I make mistakes every day. I say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, forget important things. He paused. But I love them. And I'll keep trying, keep learning, keep showing up. That's all I can promise. That's more than many parents promise. The judge was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to address the courtroom. I've heard a lot of opinions about this case. Some of you believe Mr. Thornton is doing something improper, that a single man shouldn't raise children, especially girls, that it goes against the natural order of things. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the crowd. I've also heard testimony from 5 children who were abandoned by their stepmother, who nearly died in a blizzard, who were taken in by a stranger and given a home. I've seen how they've grown and healed under Mr. Thornton's care. I've seen a family forming not through blood, but through choice. Charlotte felt tears pricking her eyes. The law is supposed to serve justice, the judge continued. And justice in this case is clear. These children need a home. Mr. Thornton has provided one. The proper course of action is to make that arrangement permanent. He picked up his gavel. I hereby approve the petition for adoption. Charlotte Samuel Emma Jacob and Lily Brooks are now legally the children of Elijah Thornton. May this family thrive. The gavel came down, and Charlotte felt the world shift. Around her, chaos erupted. Emma was crying and laughing at the same time. Sam was trying to look dignified, but failing miserably. Jacob was jumping up and down, his injured foot forgotten. Lily had wrapped herself around Eli's waist and wasn't letting go. And Charlotte. Charlotte just stood there, feeling something break open inside her. All the fear, all the worry, all the endless weight of responsibility she'd been carrying since she was 7 years old. It didn't disappear. Maybe it never would completely, but it was lighter now, shared, borne by someone who had chosen to carry it with her. Charlotte, Eli's voice cut through the noise. He was standing in front of her, Jacob on his hip, Lily still clinging to his side. Sam and Emma pressed close. "Yeah. Welcome to the family. Officially." She threw herself at him, and he caught her, pulling her into the tangle of arms and bodies and tears that was her family now. Really, truly, legally, her family. The walk out of the courthouse felt like a dream. People were clapping, calling out congratulations. Mrs. Brennan hugged Charlotte so tight she couldn't breathe. Dr. Brennan shook Eli's hand and said something about coming by for dinner. Even some of the people who'd opposed them looked thoughtful, reconsidering. Reverend Porter was notably absent. "Can we get ice cream?" Jacob asked as they climbed into the wagon. "To celebrate, we can get whatever you want." Eli's voice was thick. "Today's a special day." They stopped at the general store where the owner, Mr. Patterson, presented them with a box of candy free of charge. "Congratulations," he said gruffly. "You've got good kids there, Thornton. Don't mess it up." "I'll try not to." Back at the ranch, Agnes was waiting on the porch. One look at their faces told her everything she needed to know. "Well, it's about time," she said, but her voice cracked on the words. "Get inside. I've got dinner ready and there's cake for after." The evening passed in a blur of food and laughter and the kind of warmth Charlotte had almost forgotten existed. Miguel and Raphael joined them, toasting with glasses of cider, while Jacob told them about the courtroom in increasingly exaggerated detail. "And then the judge said Eli was the best father in the whole territory," Jacob declared, and everyone clapped and cheered and threw flowers. "That is not what happened," Sam said. "It's what should have happened." Later, after the younger ones were in bed, officially legally Eli's children now with all the rights and protections that entailed, Charlotte found herself alone on the porch. The night was cold, but clear. The stars scattered across the sky like scattered diamonds. "Can't sleep." Eli's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach, but she wasn't surprised. He had a way of knowing when she needed company. "Just thinking. About everything. Nothing." Charlotte pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "It doesn't feel real yet. The adoption. Being safe. Having a future." "It's real." Eli moved to stand beside her. "I've got the papers to prove it." "Papers can be lost. Torn, burned. Then we'll get new ones." He was quiet for a moment. "Charlotte, I know you've spent your whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the next disaster, the next betrayal, the next loss. And I can't promise you that nothing bad will ever happen again. Life doesn't work that way. I know. But I can promise you that whatever happens, you won't face it alone. Not anymore. You've got me and Agnes and your brothers and sisters. You've got a home and a family and people who love you." His voice was rough. "That's not nothing. That's everything." Charlotte felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I used to dream about this," she admitted. "When I was little, before Mama got sick. I used to imagine what it would be like to have a normal life, a home that stayed in one place, a family that stayed together. I thought if I just worked hard enough was good enough that I could make it happen. And then Mama died, and Pa fell apart, and Harriet came, and Pa died, and everything just kept falling apart. No matter how hard I tried, no matter what I did, it was never enough. It was enough." Eli's hand found her shoulder, turning her to face him. "You kept your family alive, Charlotte. Through poverty and grief and abandonment and a blizzard that should have killed you all. You held them together when any adult would have given up. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice. You could have saved yourself, left the younger ones, found help, let someone else deal with them. But you didn't. You chose them every single day over and over again." His voice was fierce. "That's not weakness. That's strength. The kind of strength most people never find." Charlotte looked up at him. This man who'd stumbled into their lives and changed everything. He wasn't her father, not by blood, not by history. But he'd become something else. Something maybe even more important. He'd become the person who chose her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for stopping that day, for taking us in, for fighting for us when no one else would." "Thank you for letting me." Eli's voice was rough. "For trusting me enough to stay, for giving me a reason to keep going." They stood in silence watching the stars wheel overhead, and Charlotte felt something settle inside her, not happiness exactly, but something deeper. Peace, maybe. Acceptance. The quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "We should go inside," Eli said finally. "It's cold and tomorrow's going to be busy. First full day as an official family." "What happens tomorrow?" "Same thing that happens every day. Chores, meals, teaching Sam not to fall off horses, helping Agnes with the cooking, reading to Jacob before bed." He smiled. "Life, Charlotte. Regular, ordinary, beautiful life. Regular, ordinary, beautiful life." Charlotte rolled the words around in her mind like stones worn smooth by water. It sounded so simple when he said it, so possible. "One day at a time," she said. "One day at a time." They went inside together, and Charlotte climbed the stairs to the room she shared with her sisters. Emma was already asleep, her breath soft and even. Lily was curled around her doll, one hand stretched toward Emma like she needed to know her sister was still there. Charlotte changed into her nightgown and slipped into bed. The sheets were clean, the mattress soft, the room warm from the fire that Agnes kept burning. Home, she thought. This is what home feels like. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she fell asleep without fear. The years that followed weren't easy. There were struggles and setbacks, arguments and misunderstandings. Sam broke his arm falling off a horse. Emma got scarlet fever and scared them all half to death. Jacob went through a phase of running away at least once a month, though he never got further than the creek before turning back. Lily's silence returned sometimes in moments of stress, but it never lasted as long as that first terrible time. And Charlotte learned slowly to let go, to trust, to let other people carry some of the weight she'd been bearing for so long. She learned to laugh without waiting for the other shoe to drop, to hope without expecting disappointment, to love without fear of losing. She grew up on that ranch, surrounded by family, the family she'd been born into, and the family she'd chosen. She learned to ride and rope and manage accounts. She learned to bake bread that didn't burn and mend clothes that didn't fall apart. She learned that being strong didn't mean carrying everything alone. And one day, standing on the porch of the house that had become her home, looking out at the land that had become her heritage. Charlotte Brooks. Charlotte. Thornton now finally understood something she'd been trying to grasp her whole life. Family wasn't blood. It wasn't obligation or duty or the accident of birth. Family was a choice, a commitment, a promise made and kept day after day through hardship and joy and everything in between. She'd been abandoned once, left to die by someone who should have protected her. But she'd been found too, saved, chosen. And in the end, that was the story that mattered. Not the abandonment, not the suffering, not the long years of struggle and fear, but the moment when a stranger stopped his horse in a blizzard, walked through a door and changed everything. 5 children had been left to freeze in a broken-down cabin. One man had found them, and together they'd built something that neither abandonment nor loss could ever break. A family.